In deciding how best to maximize your Social Security benefits, remember the success of whatever strategy you choose depends on having your asset allocation set up properly. In other words, you don't want allocations that could hinder or jeopardize your goal, which is to maximize your benefits. Nothing exists in a vacuum. Whether you retire at 62, 66, or 70, most people agree that you can't retire on Social Security alone. You need to supplement your benefits with other income-generating investments. But how do you do that today? Well, if you have all your money in bank accounts or CDs right now, and if you're one of the lucky ones, you might be earning maybe 2% at best. That means even if you have $1 million in the bank, you'll only get $20,000 a year to use as income if you don't want to touch your principal, which you shouldn't. As we discussed in our last video, with average life expectancies today longer than ever before, people typically need a plan for a 30-year retirement. That makes spending any principal a very slippery slope. When you're in your 60s or early 70s, think of it like a 30-year-old mortgage. At the beginning, your first payment, are you paying back much of your principal at all? Of course not. At the beginning, you're paying primarily interest and just a little bit of principal. But each year that goes on, you pay a little less interest and a little bit more principal as the balance gets paid down. Somehow, miraculously, by the time the 30 years goes by, your mortgage is paid off. Now think about that in reverse. Think about your $1 million generating 2% a year. If you take out just a little bit more than that $20,000 a year, just a little bit of principal, that sum will be depleted within 30 years, much like the mortgage is paid off. So obviously, bank CDs and money markets earning 2% or less aren't great options to supplement your Social Security benefits right now. But what about the stock market? Well, unfortunately, the math is very similar. Even if you have $1 million in a stock or mutual fund portfolio today with an average dividend of 2%, that still earns you just $20,000 in annual income. If you need more income than that, clearly it's going to have to come from principal. The reality today is that in order to avoid that slippery slope of spending principal, you might need to look at some other alternatives. Interestingly, there is an entire universe of non-stock market income generating alternatives that are designed specifically for retirees who want to maximize their income. Many people lost sight of this universe during the 80s and 90s, the best US stock market in history. But what if you decided to delay taking your benefits until age 70 in order to receive the higher amount, yet you still want to retire at age 62? Well, in that situation, you not only have to think about how best to supplement Social Security income once it kicks in, but how to fill that 8-year gap until it does. So are bank CDs or the stock market options for you in that situation? Well, as we've said, even with $1 million in the bank at 2% interest, that's only about $20,000 annually. You'd probably end up having to spend principal for those 8 years. What might that look like? Well, think of worst case scenario. Even if your $1 million were under a mattress earning 0% interest, it would still be worth $680,000 by the time you were 70, assuming a 40% withdrawal per year for 8 years. But now let's say that you decided to leave your $1 million in the stock market or mutual funds for those 8 years. And another major market drop occurred like the last two that have happened since the year 2000. Remember, the first time from 2000 to 2007, the market took a nearly 50% drop and then recovered. It was more than 7 years before recovery. Then from 2007 to 2013-14, the market took a nearly 60% drop and then recovered. This time it took slightly less than 7 years to recover. So what does that mean for you as a 62-year-old retiree who's taking assets for 8 straight years? Well, if you should happen to get caught in one of those 7-year downdrafts, it means that each year the market drops, you have to sell more and more shares of your stock or mutual funds to get the same withdrawal. So even when the market comes back within 7 years or so, by the time you get to age 70, you still will not have come anywhere close to getting all of your money back. In fact, if this should have happened, you might only have between $300,000 and $400,000 left at the end of that 8-year period. In other words, you would have cannibalized your fund to the point where it would have been better if it had had it in a bank or under your mattress. This kind of cannibalizing of principal is actually a common mistake that retirees and people close to retirement make. I often refer to it as reverse dollar cost averaging. When you were younger and saving on a regular basis for retirement, such as in a 401k, you were dollar cost averaging. The purpose of the dollar cost average is to get your average cost or purchase price down. Remember that investing is simple, but not easy. The simple part is to buy low, sell high. Dollar cost averaging was often touted as a strategy and helps you buy low. Let's take an example. If you were to set out to buy $100 per month of a mutual fund, and the first month the fund was worth $10 a share, and you bought 10 shares. But let's say the unthinkable happens and the second month the market drops and to $5 a share. You decide to stick with your plan. And now in the second month at $5 a share, your $100 buys you 20 shares. So the question I have for you is simple. If you were to stop after 2 months, what is the average cost per share? If you were to say $7.50, you're not alone. It seems intuitive, but the real answer is your average cost per share was $6.66. You see, because you bought twice as many shares at $5 and half as many at $10 a share. It helps you buy low. Dollar cost averaging helps you get your average cost down. The problem, however, is that now you're at a point where you're not saving on a monthly basis anymore. If you need income from your investments, that means you're going to have to liquidate funds on a regular basis. In other words, reverse dollar cost averaging. So let's use that same example. Let's say that the first month you liquidate $100 and you sell 10 shares. The second month, the unthinkable happens and the fund drops in half. Now you have to withdraw $100. You have to sell twice as many shares. Therefore, you sold 20 shares. You've been forced to sell more shares in the down market. So now what's your average sales price per share? Well, the math is the same. Now instead of taking your purchase price down from $7.50 to $6.66, you've taken your sales price and you've pushed it down. Now, I know you want to buy low, but do you really want to sell low? Of course not. That's why reverse dollar cost averaging hurts you. It pushes your sales price downward. Dollar cost averaging is one of those things that works great in one direction and horrible in the opposite direction. It's kind of like toothpaste. Toothpaste is great when you're trying to get it out of the tube, but have you ever tried to get it back into the tube? So whereas dollar cost averaging is a great strategy for young savers, reverse dollar cost averaging is one of the most cancerous strategies you can embark upon. That's why if a 2% dividend doesn't yield enough income to supplement your Social Security or allow you to fill an income gap, you may need to question whether you should have that much in the stock market during retirement. In fact, because it's difficult today to earn any reasonable amount of dividends on an average stock portfolio, the question becomes, should you have any money at all in the stock market once you've retired? That may seem like a radical question at first blush, because of all the things that we've been taught before, well, everyone has to have some money in the stock market, or well, people are living longer these days, so we need to have some money in the stock market as an inflation hedge. The problem, though, is the stock market has never served very reliable as an inflation hedge. In fact, let me ask you a question. Do you believe, generally speaking, that history tends to repeat itself more often than not? If you answer yes to that question, as most generally do, you might be surprised to find that there are huge periods of times throughout the market history when the stock market served as a good inflation hedge, and huge periods of time when it served as a terrible inflation hedge. As it turns out, historically speaking, these periods have been very predictable and repeatable throughout history. In other words, these predictable and repeatable market cycles might very well be the best indicator to help you make sure your asset allocations are set up to help you maximize your Social Security benefits no matter what strategy you use. Stay tuned for our next video, Market History, where we will spend a little time on exactly how predictable and repeatable the market cycles have been throughout nearly 200 years of history.